Bum, 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 bum. Hello, it's Jessica again. And we have a repeat conversationalist. Thank you very much, Trisha, for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about Chapter 14, the Department of Transportation. You're a glutton for punishment and have come back for a second.
It was riveting.
Riveting. That is an adjective. I don't know that it's an adjective about this project, but it is, in fact, an adjective. All right. So, as per usual, let's kind of start with what is the Department of Transportation? Then let's kind of get to what does the Heritage Foundation, what is their vision for leadership, the mandate of leadership moving forward? What does it talk about? I have notes, you have notes. Also, shout out to Stop the Coup for good summaries as well. Um, and then what are we going to do about it? What are we going to talk about it? What are we going to say? What are we going to do? That's kind of the plan for the day. So, random question, Trisha. What is the Department of Transportation? Pete Buttigieg.
Well, do you know that the Department of Transportation has all of our transit systems, so our buses and our trains and our roadways and infrastructure, our highways, aviation and air traffic control, railroads, and interestingly, maritime transportation, our merchant marines.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And
It.
yeah.
I feel like when I even went to the website just to make sure, like, because the Heritage Foundation has not always been spot on with its facts. But it was interesting to think about all the different ways, for lack of better words, things move from point
Mhm.
A to point B.
Well, and I think that's the other interesting part, right? Because we're not just talking about people moving, we're talking about things moving too, which
Mhm.
to me made it interesting in the chapter. But but yeah, and they're tasked with safety and rulemaking and all the wonderful regulations.
I
And
think
they love the quote, deliver the world's leading transportation system.
right, right. They do love that quote. I remember that. I have it written down at the top. Also want to mention two things one I had heard of, one I hadn't, but I didn't know where they would end up. But one of them is the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Seaway, which connects all the stuff within the Great Lakes. And then pipelines, pipeline hazardous material kind of stuff is all in this one as well. So, a tiny place,
Mhm.
tiny little boutique department. Who needs it? Um, Another quotey quote that I think is kind of interesting is guidance versus law. This is kind of a baseline that has showed up in a lot of different chapters where departments or agencies, or California is most commonly used as an example, where a guide or a suggestion is given, and then evidently people just like take this expertise guidance and treat it like it's law, the nerve. And one of the things that this baseline, right, is that it's not law, so you don't have to follow it. Guidance informed by experts, which does also invoke the Chevron case that Supreme Court just overturned, where the EPA, previous to this case being overturned, was seen as an expert that might know regulations, suggestions, guidances, as we would like to say, because they might have more information about what the actual impacts are than Chevron, the corporation. So that, of course, got overturned because Chevron knows its business better than the EPA knows the impact of its business. Guidance versus law showed up a lot in this chapter. Um, there was also a little thread between the EPA chapter, the Environmental Protection Agency. One of the suggestions from that chapter is that all car standards just get shifted to the Department of Transportation because we're probably just going to defund the EPA, right? But car standards are important. Now, with the list you just did, plane standards, not important. Railway, nope, not important. Boats, not important. Cars, only cars.
Course.
Mhm.
Well, that was interesting part, that they wanted to take the maritime section of the Department of Transportation and shift it. Was it to the Department of Defense? I have to go down to my notes.
Maritime.
Yeah, they wanted to shift it. They said it didn't really fit
Oh no,
within the
DHS.
Department of
Homeland. They want
Transportation,
to move it to
Homeland
DHS,
Security.
Homeland Security, and also the Coast Guard that keeps getting shoved around in all different kinds of places too. Yes.
Yes.
There's another kind of baseline trope about this is kind of related to guidance versus the law. I'm trying. Fix your face, Jessica. Government shouldn't pick winners and losers. So I'm going to attempt to be charitable. Nepotism. We've always done it this way. I like this contract better. This company aligns with my political agenda, so they're going to get access to something that other people don't. That is what it means. It is also what it is doing. That was not lost on me.
Don't quite know. Well, as long as you have 3 bids, you've done your due diligence.
But if we're valuing loyalty to the president's agenda and calling that nonpartisan, those winners are likely to not be California liberals. Just a hunchy. Okay, so let's talk about it. What do my notes say? There was some very interesting stuff. Now I want to know what you think about this. The emerging technologies of the self-driving cars and AVs and EVs. Now, when they wrote this, they probably did not predict the Elon Musk, Tesla, China love triangle that is now in the news. But I was fascinated. It does seem like the Department of Transportation would be the place where we would talk about those things. But am I just behind? I didn't really know. I didn't know that this would be like a front of all the topics in the universe that the Heritage Foundation focuses on. That where are we going with self-driving cars, trips, or trucks, ships, self-driving ships?
Yep. Well, they're all about efficiency. And here's the conspiracy. I'm going to be just my own bias right out in front, like conspiracy theory. I just wonder about government contracts and like defense and how much they're thinking through that lens of the Department of Transportation. So there's like the little shiny jewel over here for us regular folk that, we are on the cutting edge of the world as far as technology, right? Which has always been a drive for our country, even though we're not, because we have to get everything from everywhere else in order to be that leading thing. And yeah, it struck me as funny, but at the same time, I was like, well, that would be really useful for drones and other things that people want to use, as well as big corporations, because if they don't have to pay a human to do things, or that creates efficiency in huge production, then that means more money for those big corporations.
Yeah, it does seem to literally be removing the human thought and critical decision making from scenarios that involve potential death, but efficiency.
Yeah. Well, and the other piece that I found amusing, as at the same time that they're saying let's capitalize on technology and innovation, but let's use more fossil fuels. So let's decrease regulation.
Right. Deregulate all major industries, especially airlines, because it also goes off on this interesting tangent about like baby airlines and like there should be more competition and there should be more flights available. I live in a very, well, I guess we both live in a very small rural town. So we've had a number of different airlines try to set up shop here, but I'm the only person who's traveling. And I'm not enough business to keep those airlines here. So they come and go, come and go, come and go, come and go. Again, another baseline is this free market economy. Um, it's kind of one of the first times it feels like it's almost encouraging not having a monopoly in private business because it's encouraging competition. But the fuel economy kind of questions the regulation kind of again, we're basically defunding the EPA. Spoiler alert, that's a different chapter. So then the little pesky regulations, those should be in the Department of Transportation. And then I think that's when it went on its big California sidetrack of California currently has an exception to a lot of the current federal standards. I did not know that. I'll put that out there. But the reason why it has an exception is that it's the fifth largest economy and its regulations don't scale or its needs don't scale with the existing regulations. That's the basis of the exceptions. And frankly, the results of the current regulations in California are doing better than anywhere else, which now we're back to guidance versus law. So if California is doing better and has figured out a way of doing better, some might call that like innovation. It could potentially be role modeling for other states, and other states could decide to follow suit because of their own free will and how the free market works, just using their words. Um, but it's not a law, so no one has to do it. So people feel bullied and peer pressured into doing guidance set by California. Is that what we're mad about?
I think we're well, when you say we're mad, is it like we or over, red state?
Not we. I mean, I don't feel mad about this. I didn't really even know about it. So I,
But they were upset. They were upset about
I don't even
the
know if it's past tense. I think they might still actually be
or they
active.
are. Yeah, they're actively upset about regulate for demanding that we are efficient with our fossil fuels.
Which is, what's really efficient? Not using them
Yeah. Well, that was what
wildly.
was interesting that they focused on the self-driving cars as like the up and coming technology and everything else. And I'm like, what about solar? What about all these other alternative energies? Or even better, let's put some research in. Are there even better things? No, let's just rely on fossil fuels. Um,
Yeah.
but
Um,
yeah, it's scary though, with the desire to give more control to the states and private
mhm.
sectors.
Right. Read
In
my mind.
California, we don't have to
That,
worry about that, but in other states,
so I have actually, there are very few pieces of the whole of Project 2025 that have kept me up at night, or like if I'm zoning out of an airplane window, then it like creeps back into my consciousness and I start thinking about privatizing nuclear waste disposal. That's the main one. But I know you've read the chapter. So for the two people not blood related to me who are watching this video, because you should be folding your laundry. Like I'm certain there's something you should be doing instead of watching this, but I really appreciate that you're here. Okay. Give it to the states. That's a baseline. Okay. Now, let me let me explain what's in my head, and then you can either call the police or possibly shed some light. Okay. So we gave like healthcare access to the states. For a long time, we gave like gay marriage to the states, right? Okay, so then there's this term that gets used where you like blankety blank tourism. So there's abortion tourism, there was marriage tourism. So I'm going to use the term legislative tourism, right? And so then, like, do I live here this year? I don't know. Wait till the next election. Like, there's an ease in which somebody with a typewriter thinks that people can just pick up everything they own and move without respect to, like, place, home, people, jobs, money, flexibility. Also clearly identifies that home ownership is the only and or best way for people to start building wealth. So it acknowledges home ownership. Also, the stability of a home, we already talked about this in a different chapter, is a heterosexual marriage of a cis man and a cis woman. They did not use the word cis, I'm just being clear, who have conceived children, right? So those people are the ones who are being told, like, well, pick and choose where you want to live. I'm going to try really hard not to make a judgment face and just say that that is some facts that are in the document. Okay, Department of Transportation. Get on topic, Jess. If transportation related issues, which you did an excellent job of just saying is basically the movement of stuff the best way, is given to state or local government, right? Like, have you ever played that train game, right? Like all the different cities, not Missouri, but St. Louis is a really good one. Okay, state and local governments, ferry boat terminals, hiking trails,
Mhm.
biking trails, sidewalks are in addition to highways, boatways, maritime issues, aviation. How's aviation going to be by state, like where it lands and takes off, but then the air is just a free for all, which sounds terrifying, except we're also talking about privatizing airport towers so that they are unmanned,
Yes.
because I'm sure a computer can fly an airplane. Um, as someone who's on an airplane more than I'm in a car, that was not sleep producing.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so now we're back to the blankety blank tourism. Imagine, so the closest parallel I can think of is, like, while I am in this state, can I turn left on right? Some states you can, some states you can't. So you have to guess. And if you do it in a state you don't, sometimes it works to say, like, I'm sorry, I live in a state where you can do this. I didn't know. But it's your responsibility to know what you can do in each state. So it would be
As
your
long as
responsibility.
you're driving while white. Sorry,
Right,
go
right, right.
ahead.
Oh, very important detail. If you are a white person, correct. Um, that's, that's the winning line of the day, and it's only 7:20 in the morning. Okay, if I were to be on a train, like Amtrak, I'm going to go from New York City to DC, the regulations would change as I am crossing different states without people there to enforce those different standards, because we want less staff and more things automated. How is this going to work? Did this become a clear, whether we agree with it or disagree with it, was there clarity in how removing people, enforcing state and local laws on all forms of transportation that are full of stuff and people, how's that going to work? What are we doing? Every county, like, I grew up in Texas, so you could be in a car for 20 hours and still be in the same state, but each county could be different. We're just going to post signs on the side of the road.
Well, that was where I started to think about like tolls and different things. And so you literally could be, like you're saying, in one county, go to another county, and all of a sudden you need $1.50 to get on that stretch of road. And do you have that $1.50? You know? And so yeah, I have no idea how it will all it'll end up looking like a cell phone bill, I think is what it's gonna look like.
Oh, well, that's a different chapter. And a lot of those extra charges, those are going to different things. So that, don't invoke a cell phone bill, because that's another one of the sleep problems.
Yeah.
I think somewhere in here was where one of my favorite little logic circles showed up, which is, it's two words: requiring requirements.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not exactly sure if that is an unclear concept, but I think it really highlights the quality of writing that's happening. You have to be able
What?
you have to be able to require requirements, and then those that are requiring those requirements have to do and comply with those required requirements. So
Was that when they were talking about, I thought it was curious that they were like the Department of Transportation is more of a grant making department, and we need it to be more on the regulations.
I mean, it came up a number of times, but I think that's kind of
Yeah,
like the starting TED talk. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, there are points where like I don't think I realized, and maybe it's again because we live in California, but just the boldness of definitely encouraging the increased dependence on fossil fuels.
Yes. Yep.
Like it's been I mean, again, grew up in Texas, but it's been a long time since I've heard someone say, like, you know what, we need to do this more. And I thought kind of at least focusing on independence instead of dependence. Like
Hmm.
maybe like focusing on fossil fuels we produce instead of having to import export or something. But this is just straight up. We need to use more coal.
That's what, yeah, I was like, no, it literally blew my mind
Mhm.
that they had brought that up. And I actually had to read, like I went out of the chapter because they had one line about
I do love me a side
one
researcher.
one reason for the high number of injuries on American roadways is that fuel economy standard raises the prices of cars, disincentivizing people from purchasing newer, safer vehicles. I'm kind of like, I had to rewrite it for my brain because they were
Because
like
of
more
grammar.
accidents. And I was like, there's more accidents because of fuel prices? I don't understand. And
I would
so
think there's more accidents because we've removed drivers.
that there will be. Did you watch that movie? Um, the end of the world one. Uh, I the whole idea that we're gonna make our roads safer because everybody is driving a gas car just again doesn't make sense to me because if we do research instead on alternate technologies and like hybrid cars, all electric cars, um, and there's more of them, then the price of them should decrease.
Right, because of look at us using supply and demand and like the free market economy. Right.
Yeah.
It is interesting if we could slow down enough to realize in our disagreements we are actually using the same system of creating a solution. We're not
Mhm.
disagreeing with we're not disagreeing with how you reached your decision. We are disagreeing with how you are reading the answer that came out when you reached your decision. Um, I was just at a board retreat and my clients were like, "So, what fun project have you been working on?" And so I started this conversation about Project 2025. And it was just so interesting because there was some heated moments, right? And I had to be like, "Excuse me, you are both using like basic economics. You're just interpreting the results of basic economics differently than
Mhm.
either of you were expecting, right?" So, um, you can make numbers do anything you want them to do. But I do think that it's important to state that, like, if we're talking about free market economy, and just like you said, if you're taking the inventory off, supply goes down, demand goes up. That is an incredibly profitable situation for this private business that we're supposed to be focusing on, assuming their local and state law support. It just doesn't make sense. But yes.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
well, we're done. Just kidding. Um, I did go down a little baby rabbit hole about aviation. We already talked a little bit about growth, increased growth and competition and capacity. Um, but my little footnote, not that they used footnotes, would be if you have customers, if there is an interest of people going there. I have flown to some very small airports, and most of the reason why small airports exist is I would assume related to transportation. So it's like, so organ donors have a place to go,
Yeah.
so that um, emergency supplies, I mean, it's part of like an infrastructure, right? So prisoners can be dropped off or, let go or picked up or whatever. Like there's a federal need to have, we don't have an airport anywhere near here. We need one. That is a really expensive thing to do, and there are tons of airports that are barely open. So, yeah, sure, increase options, growth for business. Like, I think that would be great. You could really do a lot with prices, but you're also deregulating everything related to the infrastructure of the airline industry. And then it started talking about drones and air taxis, and I wrote this down, vertical
Yeah, I
takeoff
was
and
trying-
landing.
yeah. I was like, what is that? Like, I think
Yeah.
I can conceptualize it, but
So if it's in a thing that doesn't have humans or at least eardrums on it,
you're right.
the idea is that you don't need space to you
Right.
don't need the runway, right? You can just go straight up and straight down. But there is evidence that they are trying to create human carrying things with eardrums carrying planes that no longer need the space of a runway. I'm not a doctor, but I'm just going to say that I don't think that feels good on my anatomy.
They'll figure it. I mean, I read a lot of sci-fi dystopian novels, so it's kind of thing.
Yet again, Trisha's coming in as a resource.
Well, you
Um,
know how they say like sci-fi always predicts, right? Like potential predictions, right? The multiverse of what could happen. I mean, I think they would figure it out. It's like that initially it'll be like that ride at the amusement parks where you strap in and then the thing like catapults you straight up at like 50 miles per hour. To your point, it won't feel, I mean, for me, I'd be excited, but not everybody's jam.
I think I would be good with going up, but I would need like a slow
Oh,
back to earth. Um, yeah, but this
but
is also this is also the most common alternative to driving, where
Mhm.
driving is going to be fuel costs and highway regulations that change potentially local municipality to local municipality. Um, sounds delightful.
Well,
Um,
but did you see the part about the program? Well, I'm sure of course you saw the part about the program that they talked about defunding what was it? To premiere the we have the new entry, so that was about the new entry initiative, which was trying to increase more commercial private companies getting in. But
mhm.
then there was the program, oh, the Essential Air Service Program.
Oh yeah, I did write that down. Go ahead, feel free.
But Crescent City is on the list. So I rabbit holed and went and I was like, what are these 200 airports? And I was like, Crescent City, which is like miles away from us, which
Yeah.
also, to your earlier point, is close to a prison.
hmm And Crescent City used to have direct flights with United,
Yeah.
and now it is mostly private air carriers like FedEx, organ donation, etc. And the prisoners at Pelican Bay, they actually get transported down to Eureka now because there isn't a direct flight from Crescent City to Eureka,
Yeah.
which would have been a 3-minute flight, but still. So they come down to Eureka. I only know this because they are dropped off at 5 a.m. and like the first thing they have to do is navigate the computer system to check in on the airplane.
Yeah.
And they're I see these folks all the time. So then I am myself. So I'm like, can I help you with the computer process? And I think it's the first time likely somebody's talked to them, that a civilian, so to speak. Yeah. But Crescent City is one of them. And again, back to local municipalities, the Del Norte County and the local municipality of Crescent City has to keep that airport operational without commercial airline support.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
can't see zero problems with that. Kind of on this note, we were talked a little bit about public transit, the idea of moving public transit away from kind of this current idea of transit provided by public municipality to something significantly broader so that it's just provided by the public, or I'm sorry, provided for the public. That way there's an opening for private sector to come in, so it's not just government, local government, municipality government funded sources, but then that opens the door for the private sector. What could go wrong with competing companies running different bus schedules? They work so well currently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It goes back to your earlier point. Like this chapter had a lot around like the concept. We all want safe travel. We all want accessible travel. We all want efficiency. And what are the ethical implications of the things that they're saying? Because as we privatize, that cost isn't just gonna like, it's gonna come down to the consumer, the everyday Joe, as one might say. And so what's that impact for poor communities, the poor local communities, who can't, their bus system goes away because these big corporations, why would they spend their resource there? Right? Especially if the Department of Transportation stops becoming a grant funding entity and is just doing the requirements for the requirements, because they're going to have a lot of requirements, as
do
you
you think
said,
they'll
with
have
all these bus routes.
will they have a room of requirement where they are then doing the required requirements?
Yeah.
Right. Also, who needs federal support? Like we're going to decrease the federal support for all of these programs. We don't need
Right.
any kind of overarching nothing because individual companies have worked out so well. There's also a call for the public transit definition to include
Yes.
individual things, right? Like ride sharing, the autonomous vehicles we already talked about. It is interesting. This is again me trying to be charitable, that it does mention electric vehicles in the same chapter where we're supposed to increase our dependency on fossil fuel. Um, the efficiency or business innovation aspects of not having drivers, um, some might say, seems to be like a contradiction.
Can
Somebody
I,
somewhere could mention
can
it.
I tell you my favorite quote though in the whole chapter?
Oh my gosh, please do.
Equity, a nebulous concept that in practice means awarding grants to favored identity groups.
Hmm. Which is
That was
picking winners and losers, right? Because you don't want to do that. All right. Okay. So now let's talk about what can we actually think about and do, right? So if we take maritime, I'm going to forget one. Maritime, rail, aviation, cars,
transit.
trains. Oh, highway. Well, cars themselves and then the highways that they're traveling on. Okay, there are others because I don't live near the Great Lakes, right? And pipelines, I guess, is another thing. Okay, I think one thing that might be a helpful conversation starter over dinner is where do you live, right? Like, um, is there an Amtrak station near you, or is it just postal trains or um, livestock trains or shipping trains? Like, is there a rail line near? Where is it? What kind of stuff is transported on that? Petrol, if we're privatizing nuclear waste disposal, could be that. What is on your train track? That would be the first thing. Similarly, and I only think it because mentally I think about pipelines along train tracks because infrastructurally that has made some sense, I think. Is there any kind of pipeline situation crossing near your place where you live, inside your state? Do you have access or need for any kind of maritime regulation? We obviously live on the ocean and we have the bay. There are times I can see the bay from my backyard, and there are times where I'm like, where is that big ship coming from? Right. And our city, Eureka, has made some agreements of having cruise ships stop or different tourism kind of stops. Research ships have stopped here, and it's a great revenue source for the local community. But there are some big ships that show up, and you're like, that is not a sailboat, right? Okay, so like, what's your connection? What are your connection to these things? What's your public transportation, whether it's buses or subways or rail line or something like that? What exists in your city or in your town, in your municipality? If you want to go advanced class, what other municipalities or counties are those same things in? Even if it's
Mhm.
just close the bubble, your daily commute, if you have one, or like driving to grandma's house, like what if you imagined a you know 12-foot fence at the end of each municipality, how many of those different sets of rules might you have to go through on your regular routes on the way to Costco or wherever you're going? I think that that might be helpful, and it might bring the Department of Transportation like home a little, so that it's kind of less, even for someone who travels on a plane all the time, it just kind of felt, I don't know, ethereal until I read the chapter and was like, oh, this is like everything here today. Um,
Mhm.
that would be my suggestion. Do you have any suggestions?
I was just my one was take the bus. Like one day, go to work and take the bus instead of driving your car and see what it requires
Mhm.
of you. Like how does it shift how your world exists? Just to experience, like get out of your norm to experience what someone else might be experiencing, if that's not your norm. Because I know some people that is their norm. They take the
Mhm.
bus every day. For me, that's not my reality. And so a grounding for me would be to experience that firsthand. How easy is it? Like you're saying, how many, the time schedule and how many stops and like how long does it take? Because for me, I'm really worried about our folks who don't have cars and
Mhm.
are,
Yeah,
living paycheck to paycheck, what the impact's going to be on them.
I would also, I think that's a great suggestion, and I would also encourage like updating that story, because when I lived in New York City, I took the subway all the time, and so then
Right.
there's a story in my head that I'm very familiar with public transportation. Well, kind of. I mean, that was 25 years ago, but sure. So when Lauren goes to school, he usually rides his bike. But sometimes it's raining because we live in a rainy place. So sometimes he'll take the bus instead. It's 12 miles. Riding his bike, loading up the bike, getting everything done, riding the bike, unloading the bike, doing showering at the office, etc., takes exactly the same amount of time as getting out of the house, walking to the bus station, waiting for the bus or the bus stop, getting on the bus, hoping the bus doesn't break down, all the different stops along the way, and then the bus dropping him off relatively close to work, and then walking into work and then unsettling at his desk. It is basically the same. That that is surprising to me. I don't know which one I would assume would be quicker, but I wouldn't expect them to be the same. So yeah, kind
Mhm.
of really personalizing time and distance and what is available. I think that's the best suggestion.
Yeah.
Um, just so that you are aware of what is happening. Probably there's going to be a city council meeting. There might be, I was on the transportation committee in my local city for a hot second. There is a possibility that there are some like municipality level meetings that you should go to. Read what are they talking about? What are they changing? What are they updating? Local community. Eureka just changed a bunch of parking regulations, by the way, FYI. And I don't know that most people know that. And that's just parking.
Yeah.
But customizing and personalizing where you actually are, I think, is probably the best suggestion. So, all right. Well, I think that's chapter 14. Thank you very much, Trisha. Let's see if I can con you into doing any other chapters.
Was that
Hello, it's Jessica Pettitt, and we are here with chapter 19, the Department of Transportation, once again with our repeat researcher and friend, Trisha. Thank you so much for being here.